Okay. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned um, feminism in particular, because there is this allergy, this huge allergy. American Muslim men have to feminism, and I actually I got a little irritated one day, and I put a meme up. I said, you know, everyone railing against feminism need to appreciate how much of their resistance language comes from it. And I mean, you said to create these safe spaces that, you know, if men were creating safe spaces, then I don't think that feminism would be that much of a threat, because if anything, it's a voice. It's a platform to exert a position and a voice, and that shouldn't be threatening to Muslim men that women want to exert their voices, especially Muslim men who are really truly leaders, because they want to hear what the people who are being oppressed and downtrodden have to say. And so I think, you know, it's kind of refreshing. I very rarely hear an African American Muslim male use feminism and not blast.
because at the end of the day, and especially I would say with this for Muslims, and one of the things about many of African American Muslim communities, and maybe the only ones that did not, you know, but even them, but you know, many African American Muslim communities who converted to Islam, and especially learned from immigrant communities, unfortunately, they inherited a lot of the misogynistic tendencies of some of those of the places back where they, you know, where they studied from. Just being real, right? And so, and a lot of this, I believe, has to do with why those families were decimated and those communities were decimated, as opposed to, let's say, that did not happen with, say, the Nation of Islam communities or even Warthin communities to the same extent. You see what I'm saying? I think it's because we follow, like, and follow as when it comes to relationships in our relation, like, as one of the things that I feel like African Americans had that we already innately had, even culturally, is that we had a better feel for listening to and even from a romantic standpoint of seeing our women as human beings, right? And when we hooked up, you know, and we started listening to some of these lectures.
That's the last few up a little bit, and can you repeat the last few sentences, because you broke up a little bit, and it sounded like you were saying something really profound.
Oh, okay, yeah, it sounds like it's breaking up. Can you hear me better now?
See, I told you before you were going to be dropping too much knowledge, so
SubhanAllah, man. MashaAllah.
We got to stop him. Wait a second. He's talking about feminism and not feeling threatened. No, we got to like cut him off right now. Stop breaking.
I mean,
you were saying that we had a better feel of what?
We had a better feel as African Americans culturally for respecting our women and seeing them as human beings. From, you know, and I think when we, for example, we started listening to a lot of these lectures that, let's be real, they dehumanized women in the context of marriage. You know what I'm saying? In the context of what they had the ability to do and and how they should affect the world. I mean, in many places, still to this day, they're still getting to the point where they allow women to speak publicly. You see what I'm saying? In public spaces in certain places. This is what we have to understand. If we learned our Islam from these people, filtered down into how we govern our families, right? So, yeah, when I see a lot of Muslims adopting some of the strategies that feminism may adopt, I get it, because you got to fight tooth and nail and claw just to, you know, okay, you know what, you're not gonna just take my humanity away from me, right? Now, I personally, I don't agree with everything, but then feminism is also, it's a very wide, to me, there's a very wide range of how people are defining feminism, and not every, and I tell you what, the women who I roll with, like, they don't, like, there's some aspects that they agree with and some they don't, and so I don't believe in this whole zero-sum kind of thing that's going on with feminism. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Where you take, no, like you said, look at, like, whenever I see people who don't have the power of another people speaking and there's yelling out, my question then becomes, why? You have to first ask yourself the question. There's a reason why this is happening. You know, and the women that I know, my experience with women that I know is that when they actually feel safe enough to trust you, they'll chill out. But getting them to feel safe enough to trust you, that's a different story. You know what I'm saying? Because of all the things that happen, and that could be passed down generationally or whatever. You see what I'm saying? So I understand where it comes from. You know, I understand where it comes from. And I believe, like, when you look at the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and how he listened to the people who, you know, who they might have even had a conclusion that he had to correct. But what he did was he listened. He said, and often he didn't interrupt the conversation before. He listened to everything that was said.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? And then, you know, and recently I was, you know, talking to a sister, and she was like, you know, Allah telling me about an ayat of Quran where Allah says, I hear the woman who complains. And that's all he says. I hear the woman who complains, right? So what's happening, I believe, with a lot of our reactions to feminism is a little bit of guilt, because there's a lot of men, for example, who become materially successful, right? There are men, we have, as Muslims, some of us have big conferences. You know, we have put our money into what we feel is important. But I worked at a Muslim women's shelter for 7 years, right? And the amount of struggle that the sister who I work with just had to do just to get the support or the interest for men to feel like it was important enough to make that a priority told me that we have our priorities wrong. Because at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we go back to him, whether we were able to build these big conferences and stuff where we can all meet, you know, that's one thing. But Allah didn't ask us to do that. What Allah did ask us to do is be protectors of women, right?
Yeah.
Allah is very clear about that. Protector for women can mean a different thing depending on that person. For example, protecting your wife is different from how you protect a woman who you might see on the street. You know what I'm saying? In some ways, just being an ear to someone who's been traumatized is a protection. You see what I'm saying? So when we decide that Allah gave us a responsibility, and that's the number one thing when it comes to our women, if we look at if we frame how we relate to women from a standpoint of it's a response to protect souls, and that Allah, Allah put, women, like, at the end of the day, there are going to be evil men in the world, right? Yeah. Our job is to protect them from evil men, not by telling them what to do all the time, not by controlling them or micromanaging their affairs, but by just having a space so that you do what you do without being accosted, by other people who want to see you down. You know what I'm saying? So that's how the Quran informs me of that, to be honest. The Quran does. Like, it's clear to me. Like, it's not even hard. Like, in marriage, all the way to the standpoint of what Allah says. Like, Allah says to, in Surah Al-Mumtahina, he's like, when a woman comes to you from the outside, then, make sure she believes, and then don't send her back, right, out to the disbelievers, right? So I can see that was speaking to a certain context, but I can look at the universal meaning and say we have we have sisters out. We just did an event out in Baltimore where we were talking about how do we really ask the sisters, how can we keep you safer? Because there's a lot of single women out here, and we don't even know, like, a lot of men don't even know the struggles of single women, especially ones who are wearing hijabs that are identified a certain way. How do we, like, the first thing we need to do is care about it, right? Then once we care about it, I think anyone who cares about it and actually listens to the arguments can say, okay, you know what? With all these women who have been taken advantage of or who have been feminist, then I can see why there has been a rise of people who have attached to some of the concepts of feminism, regardless of whether I agree with it all or not. I don't have to agree with everything to see why it's happening or why, or why somebody attaches to it.